Hi, I'm Jessica Lindl, author of The Career Game Loop, and really looking forward to hosting today Steven Christian. Steven is going to talk to us all about how to build a community from scratch. When you literally have nobody in your network who's doing what you want to do, how do you actually start that community? Welcome, Steven. We're really happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'll let Stephen fill in some of my introductions, but my first interaction with Stephen was actually at a conference, which is one of our tips in the book is if you have the opportunity, go in person to a conference. Stephen came up to me with his project, which is usually what happens, where there's some immersive experience or game experience that somebody's created and they want my opinion on it. But what was super unique about Steven's approach is he had actually built a physical hardware set to go along with it, an actual physical headpiece, which I'd never seen anybody do. And that just opened up this door for me into the incredible amount of creativity and ingenuity that Steven brings, not just to immersive creation, but into actually other fields like getting his medical degree, which congratulations, Steven. I understand you've just passed your boards.
Yeah,
Really exciting.
it's one of the most stressful experiences I've ever gone through. Apparently, that's just a thing. You got to keep taking board exams in order to keep going through the process. So I guess I'll get used to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of exams in your future. By the way, there's a great company, just a small plug, called Level X that is all built on Unity. And instead of taking traditional exams and courses through your medical practice, you actually log on and play some video games. So that was my commercial break, by the way. But let me start talking about you. I'd love it if you could just walk us through your career journey, maybe starting in high school, who you were in high school, and where you're at today.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, high school. That was a while ago. Yeah, so for the most part, um, grew up in like Sacramento and Sacramento, California, and most of my experience in like high school and just growing up was just centered around sports. So, for me, or at least people, like me, somebody that grew up in like a Black American family, very traditional, at least from my standpoint, opportunities kind of came from, being a good athlete. And I think I was like one of the top, football players coming out of Northern California or like coming out of the West Coast. And from there, if football wasn't in the picture, then I didn't really see myself pursuing that avenue. And that really came down to like, I graduated and I was going to go to Stanford, but then I decided not to because I didn't think that experience of playing football there was going to be the best one for me. And to that point, I also passed up a couple of Ivy League schools because, I didn't think that experience really fit what my intentions were to kind of go to the NFL and stuff. In hindsight, maybe I could have chosen differently, but it provided me an opportunity to go to live in Hawaii and like, experience that, which I never did. And so I think football was an avenue for me to sort of get out of Sacramento and get out of the environment that I was just sort of used to, which people often just kind of get stuck there, right? Like if you didn't go to college or if you didn't play a sport to go to college, like you were just in Sac, right? And there wasn't really much like opportunities for you in that respect, especially for people my age. Especially because I like graduated in 2008, and that was during like the housing market burst, and like everything was bad. And so from there, I graduated at 17, and so I went off to pretty much live in Hawaii and play football. Um, and from there, ended up having a couple of injuries. I had hip reconstructive surgery, and I think that opportunity or that experience was really a formative one because the thing that I knew, the thing that was paying the bills for me, one day it was just gone, and I didn't know if I would ever have the opportunity to regain that ability to sort of play or walk or do anything like that. And it became a point of reflection. And so when you're 19, 20 and all you know is being an athlete, and then you're stuck in a wheelchair and you don't know what the future holds, and all your eggs were in that sort of athlete basket, there's a point of reflection that like you're forced to sort of reckon with. And I think icing on the cake was somebody stole my like Xbox and my TV and my computer as well. So like it was just like icing on the cake. Like what do you do when you can't do the things that you want to do, and then you can't do any of the things to take your mind off of your situation. And so I really got into the just sort of the opportunity of exploring the things that I really cared about growing up. And so it was just a lot of like, many nights of just sitting in my room, just sort of thinking about reflecting on the things that I cared about. And I was like, I really enjoyed like comics. I really enjoyed cartoons. I really enjoyed like visual storytelling, telling stories. And I always had this interest in like technology and like making things, right? I was a kid that like if I couldn't afford I love like Legos and I love like Transformers but I couldn't really afford all of those things. And so I would just like make them out of like paper craft. I would like paper craft them. And so I would make like paper airplanes that had like that can transform into like little like paper robots and stuff. And like that was like really fun to me. And just once I got introduced to like the creative tools and everything, because I just needed time to actually, you know, process my emotions and process the situation that I'm actually heal, I needed to take that distraction. I needed to take my mind off of just sort of that reality and be able to sit down and just sort of work on ideas and then just like put it on the internet and, get responses from there like that. Like after I started doing that for a while, it was really fun. And so I ended up, applying to the school newspaper after I had my second surgery, applying to the school newspaper and as a cartoonist. And I ended up getting, hired as a cartoonist for like for the first time in my life. I like had a job, which was like crazy. And I was getting published like 2 to 3 times a week. And so, like I would, send stuff to the editor, they would publish it in the newspaper. And then my friends would be like, "Hey, Steve, you were in the newspaper, they're looking at my comics and everything." And so it was just an opportunity for me to like finally see an avenue just based off of like me pursuing an idea that like I didn't know anybody that you know did stuff in newspapers. Like I just didn't know anybody that was doing these things, but like it was something that I felt compelled to do because I needed something to like occupy my mind. And it was really
So,
interesting because it allowed me to really, by me doing the stuff that I was doing and sort of branching out into from the traditional stuff, it really allowed other people to sort of have me be the point of reference for their ideas too. And that was really, really fun.
so just to make sure I'm tracking so far, you were the star football player in high school. You actually put a pause on a college route, including some Ivies, and decided instead to chase your dreams of going to the NFL. Those dreams were thwarted because of your injuries. And then it sounds like you went back to college at that point. Is that right? With the
I never left college. It was more of just like while going to school as a student athlete, you're pretty much school is kind of like a part-time thing. It's a full-time thing, but like it feels like a part-time job because the full-time commitment is you being that student athlete. And so it's that dichotomy now with like the NIL, like you sort of see that like people are getting paid and it's reflective of like the time commitment.
Mhm.
But back when I was playing, yeah, no, like it's like you're there to play football and you can get your degree while you're there. And
Got it.
so when football was out of the picture, I was still on scholarship and everything, but I couldn't participate in it. So I had to find ways to sort of fill that time because it took up so much of my time. And
Got
so
it.
yeah, it was very much like people have those like midlife crisis. I had like a early life crisis. Like it was crazy. But it gave me an opportunity to really like build my capacity for the things that like I'm currently doing now, right? And so you're used to a certain speed and you're used to a certain level of expectation that you have for yourself, and you see that success over time. And I think I was able to over the years sort of build up my capacity to handle a lot more things than what most people would do at my age. And so yeah, so I had an opportunity to work for the newspaper and do all that while I was still going to school because football wasn't there. But then after I graduated from Hawaii, I ended up having 2 more years left of eligibility to play football. and I wanted to see how far I could go with it. And so I decided to, go to Oregon State and actually try to finish up my eligibility. And so I ended up returning back to the field after having my second hip surgery. And with that, I had more capacity. So I was still working for the newspaper, I was still getting published, and I was working on my master's degree while I was, starting at Oregon State. And so it was just like you always level up every single year with every single challenge. And I think from that, it gave me an opportunity to really like do all the things that I enjoyed at the moment at like a high level, right? Like we were playing on national television. I think we were ranked like ninth in the country. So like we were in the thick of it. And then I was still like doing all the stuff that I picked up doing while I was recovering from injuries. And so it really became a point of reflection of like, you know, anything that you do, it's a matter of you just pursuing it and pursuing it with a level of passion that like I think people pick up on, and people, by virtue of like, sort of liking you and respecting you, will continue to support you in that. And I think that's one of the things that I didn't really anticipate outside of like expect outside of football, because people show up to your games and stuff like that, and that's cool. But when people show up to your art shows, when people show up and read your comics and the newspaper and like want to talk to you about that, and you're not defined by like that identity that like you sort of put upon yourself, or and you have control over that by virtue of you just doing the things that you do, it really it really made a difference. And the interesting thing about it is that I think that like experience that I had to sort of come to terms with like what my identity was, and my opportunities to sort of inspire people and how inspire them to like pursue the things that I was at least doing, that I was good at. It really translated for me like leaving football, retiring, and then ultimately deciding to pursue like medicine, because for the most part I like decided to pursue medicine because like football didn't work out, and like I tried to like become an animator at like LA, and that didn't work out. So then I was just like, well, I guess I'm young, I'll just go back to school. And the idea of somebody like being a former athlete, and then they have this artistic experience, and they have this like creative like tech experience, and they want to pursue medicine and like combine it all together, like nobody really does that. And so people were just kind of curious. And then after a while, they're like, oh, yeah, this is actually a thing and he's doing it. I'm glad that I know him. So I was like, oh. And just like every year, it just got, it be like me manifesting, just it became more and more like, more and more clear to other people. And as it became clear to other people, then like it became less of me like trying to explain what I'm doing, and more me just doing it and then sharing it with people, and then people wanting to talk about it. Also introduce me to people and like, try to see me, like try to help me along the way. So it's very much this notion of like, don't ask for permission, just do what you're compelled to do, and then people will come along and support you along the way as long as you're consistent. So it's there's no rule book to it, but I swear, as long as it makes sense to you, it'll make sense to other people in the long run.
So well said. So how, I mean, you are in so many different worlds. I know the student athlete world well. And to your point, it is really hard when that identity has to shift and that reinvention has to happen. It is overwhelming. So how did you go about building a community, or finding people who were supporting your cartoons and your art at that point in time?
I
How did you like build that first relationship or find the school newspaper or
So I found the school newspaper because I was just walking down the street, and then I just saw a billboard and they said cartoonist wanted. And then I just sent them an email. And like the funny part about it was I didn't make any comic strips prior to that. So like my first couple of comic strips were literally me trying out for it. And so I was just like, we'll see how it goes. And so I like looked up a template and just made, I think, three like samples, like, and then I submitted it, and they were like, hey, great. And in the back of my mind, I think they just needed somebody, and I don't think anybody else applied to the position. So like,
scarcity was the
yeah,
key?
right. Like it just, and so, but it worked out. But in terms of like building the community and everything, and this is like one of like one of the things that I've appreciated about sort of my journey is nobody asked me to do any of this stuff. But in my mind, I was like, if I think it's a good idea, it's selfish of me to sort of hold on to it and like not share it with other people. Right. I think like the world deserves more quirky, fun, crazy ideas. Right. And so if I have some, I will share them because if other people have them, I would like to have them too. Because it just, and so I'm just a firm believer of if you put things out there and you enjoy it and you make things for yourself, and it'll at least be a, if it isn't anything, it'll at least be a fun icebreaker to like meet people. And if it turns into something that resonates with other people, then they will in their own way find ways to support it so that they get more of what they enjoy from you. And so I feel it's very much a conversation that, you have the opportunity to have with other people that you probably have never met, probably never know, but like, you know, but because you're inspiring them to think outside the box or inspiring them or giving them an opportunity to not think about the things that maybe stress them out. And so I'm always surprised because I go to a lot of conferences and all that stuff now, who actually follows me and follows the work that I do, because I just be putting it on the internet aimlessly. I just like, and in my mind, I'm just like, I played football for 12 years. So I don't want to like forget all the things. And so if I put it on the internet, that's like my like digital archive. And if people like it, then they'll at least remind me of the things that I did that they enjoy. And so for me, I don't really have an expectation for other people to support my work, but I always try to be as consistent as possible to give people an opportunity to like connect with me in this way that like, I enjoy at least. And so yeah, I'm always reminded of that every time I like meet somebody new or somebody sees something or stumbles upon me, the work that I do, and then they like see my like Instagram, handle, and they follow me. And they're like, "Hey, Steve, saw this thing. I love it. Keep doing it." I'm like, "Cool."
So that resonates a lot with me. I feel like in the creative industries that you and I are in, you can lead almost with your heart and your creativity to engage people and start building that relationship. In the medical industry that you've now entered into, how did you even build a community even before you applied? Assuming, by the way, that nobody in your family is a doctor, but maybe I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
no, no,
Okay.
I am the resident. I'm the resident. They have like WebMD. Like I've thus far, replaced WebMD in my family, and I have a big family, so it just like anything happens, like somebody got the sniffles, they're calling me, and I'm like, can't do anything for you. Go to the doctor, like, but it's very humbling experience because of that. Because I think in terms of like the training that you get, the soft skills, I have an opportunity to really gain those soft skills by virtue of being the first in my family in a whole bunch of different ways, being the first. But it honestly, I kid you not, when I ran out of money when I was in LA, I was like, okay, I have two options. I could either like move back to the Bay Area to like live with my dad and like try to do the pre-med stuff and try to get into medical school, or I can move to Portland and pretty much do the same thing. Right. And so I was like, I have all these connections from Oregon State that are in Portland. And Portland always felt like, you know, a like Bay Area light. It's not
Mm.
like, it's very like you get a lot of the similarities, but like you also, it's Oregon. So it's like, the water, you could drink, the water out of the tap, and like, it snows and it rains and all these different things. And so it ended up just being cheaper for me to move to Portland than to just like move back home and like pursue that. And so I just told my dad, I was like, hey, here's the plan. And I'm like sitting on his couch and I'm like, hey, here's the plan. I'm gonna move to Portland. I'm gonna try to get into, the medical school up there. And I have to do some prereqs and stuff. And if it fails, could I move back home? And he was like, yes. So then I had a Mini Cooper at the time. I just piled up all the stuff that I had, all my possessions that I could fit in a Mini Cooper, and I just moved up to Portland. And I did like a postback and stuff. And I didn't realize how much it rained, because it rained like at least like 60, 70 days like that fall. I was like, Jesus, this is crazy. And so what I would do, because I was like, I don't know anybody. I'm in like these, science classes and stuff, and people don't really talk to you like that. And so it was really hard to like sort of build a community. And so I just started going on Facebook and just seeing what events were there, and I would just show up to them. And
Mm,
so and mind you, this is like pre-COVID, right? So this is like 2015, 2016. And so I would literally just like see what like networking events were happening in Portland on Facebook. And then from there, I would like sign up on all the listservs, and I would get people's business cards, and I would just try to go to lunch and, coffee as many times as I can just to like meet people. And so it was just like one conversation led to another, and then somebody knew somebody, and then, found out there was this creative scene that I didn't even know about. I moved to Portland to try to get into medical school. I didn't know there was a creative scene in Portland like that. Yeah, I got tapped in with like the underground creative scene. Everybody needed an animator, so then I started animating things. And then come to find out, a decent amount of people went to Portland State. And so then I started getting connected with different like groups in Portland State, because Portland became very small. And then before you know it, it was like I ended up like meeting one of the vice presidents of Portland State, and I was still like doing stuff for the newspaper. And he was like, "Hey, Steve, you you have like this comic strip, and we're trying to do some stuff with comics, because Portland has a lot of history in the comic industry. We're trying to do some stuff with comics for like our doing our tours for freshmen to come in. And so those that can't come to Portland, we would still want them to have like a sort of like a digital tour or whatever. So why don't we have your characters like go on a tour, and we could send that to every freshman that comes to, and any sort of incoming freshman that comes to school." And so I was like, okay, cool. Like this. And so then I was working on comics for like the actual school and stuff. So it was just like, you know, I always I'd always lead with, I'm trying to get into medical school and I do this creative stuff. I used to be an athlete, and that was always the story. And because like not many people do that, you sort of leave an impression, especially people like your work and people like talking to you. And so it was just, and there was always somebody that knew somebody, but it was really very much like I had to get my butt out of the house, and I had to get out there and talk to people and really, really, learn how to navigate, not really marketing myself, but just learning how to navigate being social and approachable. And I think that really, you sort of get a little bit of media training when you're like playing football, because they don't want you to say anything crazy on national television or like news stuff. And so I think, for me, it was a way to sort of take that training and put that into practice, and actually translate a lot of the things that I sort of learned by virtue of football into something that went beyond just like me knowing how to work out. So it's really easy to talk to people when, you do something cool that people like. And so I've, like having a hobby and leading with that hobby just to see if somebody else has that other hobby, like that goes very far.
such a great tip. I mean, I'm hearing so many things. One is just show up, like get your butt out of the house, as you said. Just show up and lead with your passion, because you're going to be way more open to connecting and starting those relationships and finding other people who have the same passion. But it doesn't mean that's your only passion that you're sharing. Like, you can bring together something as different as cartoon, animation, immersive experiences, and medical school, and bridge those in the relationships that you're building. By the way, where did the passion for medical school come from?
Honestly, I w- so I always like laugh about it, because it was more of a reluctance. I wouldn't say it's a
Mm,
passion; it's more a reluctance. And so, at least like growing up, if you like science and math and you want to help people, the only thing that really comes to mind is like, oh yeah, you'd be a doctor. That's it. So like that's really, it just made sense. It was just like, okay, well, I like science, I like math, I want to help people. I think I'm gonna try to go to medical school. That's all in terms of like possible avenues. That's the only exposure I had to it, right?
yeah.
And I think that speaks to a broader issue, right? Like, but in at least from like, how I grew up and like the environment that I was from and like the family that I came from, that's the only thing that kind of comes to mind. And
Mm.
not many people are good at math, at least that I know, not many people are good at math and good at science and wanted to help people in that way. And so when you do sort of fit that criteria, it was just like, oh, well, this is what you do, right?
It was
I've
like this
been
extrinsic advice or
yeah,
ex
yeah.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just it's a very narrow view of opportunities, and I think that speaks to sort of exposure and all that stuff. But it's kind of very much kind of like a pipe dream too. It's just like, and so I found that at least like my experience has been, once I've sort of had that path, and there have been a lot of people trying to keep me going towards that path, so I don't fall off of it because it has often felt like the things that my interest in this is kind of in like an anomaly, right? Like if I don't do it, we don't know who else is going to do it, type of thing. And so,
And then what did you find when you got there? Because it usually weeds people out, like what you just
yes,
described. The people I know who were
yes,
like, "I'm good at science and math and I like to help people," usually don't make it to passing their boards.
yeah,
There's like
or even
yeah.
like getting into medical school, like
Right. Right.
it's I and mind you, like I've struggled like through every aspect of the process. Like I got to Portland in 2015, I think, and it took me until 2021 to actually get my first acceptance to medical school, right? And so it took me, I did like 2 years of a postbac. I had to take the MCAT twice. I applied in three different cycles, and I got about 70 rejections before I got my first acceptance to medical school, right? And that probably cost me maybe about $11,000 to $12,000 like out of
Wow.
pocket to like get that first acceptance, right? And so, for me, I sort of go back to my experience as an athlete. After my first hip surgery, because I had hip reconstructive surgery, and so like after my first surgery, there was an opportunity for me to medical disqualify, and I was like, why would I do that? I'm like 19, like I can still play, right? Which kind of sounds crazy if you're like in a wheelchair, and a kid's just like, I can still play, but you're in a wheelchair, right? Uh, but then I did, and then when I had my second one, then it was like, okay, having your first one was crazy, having your second one was crazy, and you still want to play. They were like, no. And so then I was like, okay, if you're not going to let me play, I'm just going to leave and go to another school. And so that's what I did.
That's
And
who
I
you
ended up
are.
playing. Right. And
Wow.
so for me, it was just like, I call it being hard headed. Like, it just like, I'm just hard headed. Right. But it was just like, nobody asked me to do all these things. And so I'm continuing to do these things because I enjoy it and I want to. And if I were to listen to other people, my life would look different. And so me not listening to other people got into this space. And you know, I've started to, and I'm getting good responses from it. So why would I listen to other people because they don't know what they're talking about, essentially? And so, very much to that point, as things continue to like go wrong, wasn't I had to constantly convince myself that it wasn't a reflection of me. It's a matter of circumstances. It's a matter of, just where the stars are aligned at that moment in time. So as long as people don't explicitly say you can no longer do this, do something else because we will not allow you to continue. I guess I'm going to continue. And that's how I approached it. And it sucks a lot. Like it becomes really isolating. It becomes really alienating. It really forces you to like, you know, find find ways to manage the stress because you lose a lot of sleep. Bad things always happen, especially in medicine. People die, people get sick. You're in the middle of all of it, and you often don't have people that know exactly what that experience is like to help you navigate through it. But what I found is that like as long as me being sort of the creator, and I make a lot of YouTube videos and stuff like that, I can talk about it and I can build a community around my experience as I continue that journey. And so like the community continues to evolve and look different, but that's just because I'm evolving, and I'm like my career path looks different too. And so like I said before, it's like it's very much my journey and the stuff that I create and the stuff that I put out is very much a continuous conversation with like, this like feeling in this community that like is ever changing too with the world.
All right. I am loving this conversation so much. And I hate to say that we're at our last question. So, what impact do you think gaming has had on your mindset and your how you've approached your career and your journey? Not just football gaming and the discipline and focus that you got from football, but as you think through where you're going next and kind of those soft skills or durable skills that you need, maybe tie it together for us on how gaming has impacted that.
Yeah, I mean, just think about like the core tenets of gaming, right? Like it's centered around like, an experience that either takes your mind off of something that is right in front of you or that you have to deal with on a regular basis, or it allows for you, or it's an opportunity for you to connect in this way that, you otherwise wouldn't be able to do because you have a shared idea or you're coming together for some set goal, right? And so it's all like I'm very goal oriented, right? Like think about like a checklist of items that you have to accomplish to achieve a goal. I mean, that's pretty much in every video game. And like your life bar is like your essence, right? If you don't have any sleep or any resources, your life bar is in the red. So it's going to be really tough for you to get to the end of that level. And so for me, I've really appreciated the opportunity to sort of engage and express and by virtue of doing, and then also sharing and being able to help people like in their journey as well. And so like, for me, I'm like a quintessential like generalist in like the truest sense, right? Like I animate, I write, I do all these things, right? Like I'm a jack of all trades, but like a master of none. And I think when it comes to the concept of like gaming and like the games industry, in order for something to work or launch or be successful, you have to have a combination of, you can't just have a good soundtrack. You can't just have a good, character design and story. You have to have all of it work together and it all has to resonate with, sort of where people are at so that people are compelled to invest their time in it. And being able to do that sort of and apply that to my life, I can't do this by myself. I need people to support me and like invest their time into me. And if I make my journey as compelling as possible by virtue of like being authentic to myself, and also, essentially showing that I want to do right in the world, then people will come and people will stay and people will try to invest their time to make sure that goes forward. Right. And, I don't want to akin my like life and my journey to like a product, but like, everybody knows Pokemon and everybody has their reasons why they love Pokemon. And, I've always enjoyed being able to, meet new people and people will go out of their way to meet me at conferences and stuff because somebody told them about me and like I have this book and this and this and this and they're like, I need to meet this guy. Right. And then when they do, then they introduce me to other people because they're like, you got to meet Steve. And so it just, like I said, like there's no rule book, but like I'm having a blast because this is, like I didn't think any of this stuff would be possible. And I never had a reference point for like what success looked like, but I knew that I had a vision and I knew that I wanted to have a positive impact on people. And by virtue of, sort of using games tools and like exploring these quirky ideas and just sort of finding ways to express myself in the most authentic way possible and then sharing it, I get closer to that every single day. So, I guess I'll keep going.
I hope you do. I'm sure you will. Stephen, thank you so much. I had a blast having this conversation with you. I know you, our listener, did too. So many great takeaways. If you don't have a community in what you're passionate about, just show up. Just get
Yes.
your butt out of the house, show up, lead with your passion. People will connect. They'll feed off of that enthusiasm and continue to build those relationships throughout the rest of your life. I think we've known each other for probably 7 years now.
Yeah, it's
Um,
been a minute. It's been a minute.
yeah, so I've loved following your work. Everyone else can too. You can find Stephen's work at Iltopia, Iltopia. It's gorgeous. And we will not hit you up for free medical advice, but I can't wait to see what you do next with the combination of the medical, immersive, and art and design side. Lots of great med tech breakthroughs I see coming in your future that we'll all
Yes, yes.
benefit from.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
All right. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.